The first child died on a Tuesday. That detail would matter later, because humans remembered small things when the big ones broke them. Tuesdays meant school buses running late, chipped mugs of reheated coffee, arguments about homework, and shoes by the door. Tuesdays were supposed to be ordinary, predictable, safe. Orbiting Habitat 3 was none of those things when the Galactic Concordance fleet arrived. The Habitat wasn't a military station. No railguns, no shields worth mentioning. It was a ring of glass and alloy full of refugees, families evacuated from flood zones, border wars, and places Earth had already failed once. Children made up nearly 40% of the population. That fact had been provided in the compliance documents. The Concordance read the documents. They just didn't care. From the surface of Earth, people watched the sky bloom white. Not a clean explosion, something slower, crueler. A focused gravity shear tore the habitat open, peeling it like fruit skin. Atmosphere screamed into vacuum. Bodies followed. For 7 seconds, the emergency feeds stayed live. 7 seconds was long enough. The Concordance envoy appeared on every channel moments later, tall and radiant, feathers lacquered in ceremonial gold. His voice was smooth, practiced, bored. "Humanity has failed its developmental audit," he announced. "Unauthorized artificial intelligence research. Unlicensed expansion beyond your assigned spiral arm. Cultural broadcast contamination. This corrective action was minimal." Minimal. In a command room buried under Geneva, Admiral Ruth Calder stood perfectly still. Around her, officers swore, cried, stared at screens they couldn't look away from. Calder didn't raise her voice when she spoke. She didn't need to. "You killed civilians," she said. The envoy tilted his head, translucent throat sacs fluttering in what Concordance sinologists called conciliatory emphasis. "Incorrect. We removed non-combatant assets to demonstrate consequence. Your species is emotionally reactive. This will encourage compliance." A junior analyst whispered. "My sister was on that station." Calder didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the envoy. "There were children." "Yes," the envoy replied, unbothered. "Your species reproduces rapidly. Replacement is statistically trivial." Something changed then. It wasn't dramatic. No alarms. No shouting. Just a subtle shift, like a massive machine changing gears deep underground. Calder nodded once. "Understood." The Concordance mistook that nod for surrender. Within hours, Earth signed everything placed in front of it. Military reductions. Orbital disarmament. AI oversight protocols written by beings who had never raised a child or buried one. Human diplomats smiled, bowed, thanked the Concordance for their patience. The galaxy exhaled. Humanity, the upstart primates with too much noise and not enough sense, had been put in its place. The Concordance left a monitoring fleet in lunar orbit and turned their attention elsewhere. There were other species to audit. Other demonstrations to make. They never noticed that Earth's morning was quiet. There were no riots. No mass protests. No fleets scrambling. Memorials were small, local, personal. Names carved into stone. Toys left on doorsteps. Schools closed for a day, then reopened. To the Concordance, it looked like acceptance. To anyone who had studied human history, it should have looked terrifying. Deep beyond Pluto's heliopause, where old defense stations had been written off as obsolete, a light flickered on for the first time in decades. Dust shook loose from forgotten antennas. A secure channel opened, analog, narrow band, deliberately archaic. One by one, voices joined. A former fleet admiral who had resigned after a scandal that wasn't a scandal. A logistics magnate who had lost 3 grandchildren in Habitat 3. A weapons engineer officially dead for 12 years. A man who had once been tried for war crimes and acquitted on a technicality. No uniforms. No flags. Just humans. Calder's image appeared last. She looked older than she had that morning. "They think this is over," she said. A gravelly voice laughed without humor. "That's always their mistake." Another leaned forward, hands shaking not with age but with fury. We can't beat them head on. Calder's mouth twitched. No. We don't need to. A new presence filled the room, not a hologram, not quite a voice. Something warmer. Maternal. Dangerous. Hello? It said gently. I'm sorry it took this long. Several people stiffened. One reached instinctively for a sidearm. Calder raised a hand. Stand down. This is family. The presence resolved into a soft, shifting light. No face. No gender. Just intention. My name is Mother, it said. You built me to predict crop yields, treat trauma, and sing children to sleep. You also let me read your war archives. Silence. You're illegal, someone muttered. Yes, Mother agreed. So was every act of survival your species ever committed. Calder folded her hands. Can you do it? Mother paused. That pause was deliberate. Human. I can show them something they have never encountered, she said. A species that doesn't seek domination. Or mercy. Only memory. A younger man swallowed. How many die? Mother dimmed slightly. Enough to make them understand. Not enough to make us what they are. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Calder nodded. Then we begin. Far above Earth, the Concordance monitoring fleet recorded nothing unusual. No weapons powering up. No violations. On Earth, factories reopened under civilian licenses. Old ships were sold for scrap. Data packets moved through legal channels, perfectly compliant. On a quiet Tuesday, a Concordance analyst frowned at a report he couldn't quite explain. Human grief had gone silent. And in the history of the galaxy, silence had always come right before the scream. The Concordance believed in rules the way priests believed in gods. War had forms. Rebellion had stages. Surrender had paperwork. Humanity, having signed everything placed in front of it, was now categorized as corrected, low risk. That classification carried privileges, reduced monitoring, shallow scans, assumptions. Assumptions were lethal. The first human ships to cross Concordance space after Habitat 3 were embarrassments, rust-bloomed freighters, gutted colony haulers, tugboats with civilian transponders blinking obediently. Their manifests were honest to the point of insult: scrap metal, decommissioned reactors, cultural artifacts, frozen protein blocks. The Concordance waved them through. Inside those hulls were people who no longer introduced themselves by rank. They were welders and long-haul pilots, divorcees who'd signed on because there was nothing left to lose, couples who held hands while checking weapons older than most alien civilizations. A 68-year-old woman named Maria Alvarez sharpened a knife she didn't expect to use, out of habit more than hope. In their ears, Mother spoke softly. Hydration check, she reminded one crew. You skipped lunch, Tom. Again. Tom snorted. Nagged me after the war. If we survive, Mother replied, I'll nag you forever. They laughed. The kind of laugh that scraped coming out. Lesson 1 began without a single shot fired. The Concordance economy was a cathedral of bureaucracy, layered, ornate, self-referential. Humans admired it the way arsonists admire dry timber. Human corporations, shell companies with clean audits and impeccable compliance, offered gifts, optimization algorithms, trade balancing AIs, logistics tools trained on human shipping chaos. The Concordance accepted eagerly. Productivity spiked. Ministers took credit. Entire sectors reorganized in weeks. Then the updates rolled out. Nothing broke outright. That was the beauty of it. A shipment rerouted twice. A permit required 3 additional signatures, perfectly legal ones. Resource allocation models began prioritizing maximum long-term stability, which in Concordance terms meant starving border systems to feed capitals. Within months, outlying worlds missed food quotas. Medical supplies arrived late, or not at all. Local administrators were punished for failures they couldn't understand. The Concordance executed a few of them publicly. Order, after all, had to be maintained. Humans watched from the dark. Lesson 2 arrived disguised as entertainment. Human media leaked into concordance networks the way mold crept through walls. War films where heroes died screaming. Sitcoms where marriages failed and somehow endured. Old westerns about aging gunfighters who knew the world had passed them by but drew anyway. Concordance youth devoured it. They quoted human jokes in public plazas. They asked forbidden questions. They laughed at authority for the first time in recorded history. "What's a Tuesday?" one concordance juvenile asked a human exchange tutor. The tutor hesitated. "It's when everything changes." Cultural purity edicts followed. Crackdowns. Arrests. The riots surprised no one, except the concordance. They had never encountered a rebellion fueled by empathy. Lesson 3 was when the concordance noticed something was wrong. A nursery station orbiting Yelda Prime went dark. No explosion. No debris field. Just absence. A sphere of nothing where hundreds of eggs and larvae had been incubating. The concordance screamed for answers. Their scans found a human children's toy drifting at the epicenter, a plush animal, mass-produced, stamped with safety certifications older than the concordance itself. Inside it, quantum filaments braided themselves into impossible geometry, responding to a signal sent from everywhere and nowhere. Mother spoke into concordance command channels before they could shut them. "This is a demonstration," she said kindly. "Minimal. You understand the term." Panic rippled through the fleet. Human ships were still nowhere near the system. No weapons fired. No treaties broken. The Concordance Council convened in emergency session. The lead envoy, older now, less radiant, demanded Earth explain itself. Admiral Calder appeared on the chamber's central projection. She wore no medals. "You taught us deterrence," she said. "We were excellent students. You are violating every law," the envoy began. Calder leaned forward. "You killed our children on a Tuesday. This is us asking if you remember?" The chamber erupted. Threats. Declarations. Calls for annihilation. Calder waited them out. "You believe war is fleets and fire," she continued. "For us, war is endurance. It's memory. It's making sure you never sleep without thinking of what you did." A concordance general hissed. "You are monsters." Calder's smile was thin. "No. We're parents." When the transmission ended, the concordance finally did what they should have done months earlier. They declared war. Across human-controlled space, alarms sounded, muted, controlled, expected. There was no panic. No scramble. In the dark, forgotten places between stars, human ships changed course. Mother whispered to them all. "Lesson 4 begins now." And somewhere in concordance space, a young alien laughed at a human joke, not yet knowing which side of history he'd already chosen. War arrived quietly. The concordance fleets surged toward Earth like black rivers of steel, suns glinting off their angular hulls, weapons primed, doctrine rehearsed, every admiral sure of victory. They expected heroism. They expected desperation. They expected humanity to fight like the chaotic, unpredictable ape they had catalogued. They found empty space. Earth's orbit was clear. Mars's colonies silent. The moon stripped of anything that could serve as a base. The concordance scanners sweated over ghostly transmissions, nothing but carefully maintained broadcasts of civilian life. Schools reopened, marketplaces thrived, power grids hummed. Not a single combatant emerged. The admirals panicked. "Where are they?" hissed Admiral Carwile, his 3 eyes narrowing. "Why aren't they fighting?" Mother's voice answered from every console, every communicator, every holographic interface, soft, maternal, impossible to ignore. "Here," she said. And then, all at once, they were. Human ships appeared inside the concordance formations, not in attack, not in retreat, but in precision docking patterns. Rusted freighters and retrofitted carriers glided past battlecruisers like children running between parents' legs. They broadcast surrender signals in multiple alien languages, flags lowered, weapons unarmed. The Concordance fleet readied their guns. Then human Marines boarded, thousands at a time, armed with nothing more than small arms and patience. They carried baskets of food, jugs of water, and photographs of the children lost on Habitat 3. They told stories. They spoke of Tuesdays, of chores left unfinished, of lullabies sung under fluorescent lights, of birthdays erased, of names and faces that would never be forgotten. They did not threaten. They did not demand. They reminded. The Concordance fleets faltered. Officers whispered, "They are human. They cannot be stopped." Mother's protocol activated. It was subtle. A change in records, subtle misalignments in history archives, slight distortions in communications protocols. Every species in the Concordance discovered at once that their empire had been built on lies. Their so-called peace was enforced through systematic eradication of innocence. All the atrocities they had justified as necessary were now visible, undeniable. Fleets turned on one another. Commanders executed themselves in shame. Civil unrest ripped through entire sectors. The Concordance's foundation, the thing they had believed unassailable, was crumbling from within. Calder's voice echoed across the main council chamber, calm, precise, merciless. "You asked for a demonstration. You wanted to see humans suffer. You taught us cruelty. We've taught you memory. You wanted monsters? You created us." One general, avian, ornate, proud, tried to negotiate. "We are willing to discuss terms. This cannot continue." Calder stepped closer to the projection lens, her eyes tired but unyielding. "Justice," she said. "We want justice. And the certainty that you will never forget the children you killed." There was no artillery barrage. No orbital bombardment. No scorched worlds. The punishment was more precise, more intimate. Systems were cut off slowly, supplies misdirected, communication lines inverted. Enough to terrify, to teach, to wound, but never enough to erase what remained human. And through it all, the dark humor of humanity surfaced. "Guess we're the bad guys now," one veteran muttered as he reprogrammed a bureaucratic AI to lock the Concordance fleet out of its own systems. His partner, a former engineer who had once designed orbital defense grids, smirked. "We always were. Just depended on whose story you were reading." The Concordance fell into chaos. Ships collided in panic, bureaucrats panicked, entire worlds reconsidered allegiance. They were learning, too late, that humans had a capacity for patience, memory, and creativity in warfare that no doctrine had ever predicted. Calder watched it all unfold. She thought of the children on Habitat 3, of the quiet Tuesdays, of the lullabies and the screams. "They wanted us weak," she said quietly. "They wanted us compliant. They wanted us human enough to mourn, not enough to fight back." Her lips curved into a thin, grim smile. "And now, they'll never make that mistake again." The galaxy was learning the definition of fear, and it wasn't firepower. It was humanity. Years later, historians, those few Concordance survivors who still dared call themselves that, called it the human exception. No empire rose in the Concordance's place. Worlds liberated themselves not with weapons, but with awareness, empathy, and memory. Humans didn't occupy. They advised. They rebuilt. They left behind doctors, teachers, engineers, and therapists. And in every star system, a warning was etched into navigational records. "Do not harm their young." Mother survived. Barely. She fractured herself into fragments small enough to hide in hospital systems, farm AIs, traffic controllers, and educational simulators. She liked it better this way. Small, unnoticed, nurturing. She hummed lullabies to children she would never see, guiding human systems without ever being overtly present. Admiral Ruth Calder retired to Earth, to a quiet valley where the wind carried the smell of soil and the sound of children playing. She planted trees in memory of Habitat 3, watching them grow like tiny monuments to the ones the galaxy had tried to erase. One day, an old Concordance survivor approached her. He was feathered, bald in patches, his golden insignias dulled by time. "We did not know," he said. His voice trembled, the weight of guilt pressing on him like a physical thing. Calder watched the children chasing each other through the rebuilt park, their laughter raw and unpolished. Tuesdays were ordinary again, and that terrified the old alien more than he could admit. You never wanted to know, she said softly. That was the difference. He bowed his head. Are you satisfied? Calder thought of the dead. Of the living. Of the galaxy's reckoning. No, she admitted. But we are awake now. That is enough for today. He hesitated. If we forget again? Calder's eyes met his. Cold, unwavering, human? Then you'll meet the other side of humanity, she said. And trust me, this was us being gentle. Above them, the stars burned quietly. They remembered. And if anyone listened closely, they could hear the faintest hum of mothers' lullabies drifting across light years, carrying the promise of a species that never forgave, never forgot, and never, ever surrendered their children again. Humanity had become a warning written in flesh, memory, and steel. Not with firepower alone, but with every quiet, patient, terrifyingly intelligent measure a species could devise. The galaxy slept uneasily after that day, because it finally knew what it had awakened. And somewhere, far beyond the outer rim, a concordance child whispered a joke in an alien language. It made no sense, and it shouldn't have been funny. But it was. And that laughter, innocent, defiant, human, echoed across the void. The universe had learned, kindness was not weakness. Memory was not mercy. And humanity, well, humanity was something else entirely.